I didn't slam my car door when I parked. I didn't stomp up the path, furious and righteous, like a woman in movies who already knows she's about to be betrayed. I stepped out softly, as if noise might change what I'd already felt in my bones all day. The sky was bruised with late evening, clouds thick, the last light pressed flat against them. My breath made a small fog in the cold. I remember noticing it because I was trying to hold onto something ordinary: the air, the weather, the scrape of my shoe on the stone walkway. Anything that wasn't the tightness in my chest. The porch light was on. I had turned it off that morning. The curtains in the living room were open a fraction, like someone had been peeking out and forgot to fix it. A thin stripe of warm yellow cut across the front garden. The house looked awake in a way it shouldn't have. Lived in. Busy. I stood there with my keys in my hand and listened. At first, nothing. Just the hum of my own blood, the distant hiss of a car passing somewhere down the road. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not my husband's laugh. His came from his chest, heavy, careless. This was lighter, bright as glass, and it slid under my skin like a needle. Her laugh. I didn't move for a moment. My fingers tightened around my keys until the metal bit into my palm. I could have told myself 100 explanations. She's watching a show, she's on the phone, she's laughing at something online. But my body didn't accept any of them. It's strange, the way instinct speaks. Not in words. In temperature. In pressure. In the sudden, silent certainty that something precious is being touched by hands that have no right. I walked to the front door. My key slid into the lock. It turned easily, too easily. The deadbolt wasn't set. My mouth went dry. I remember swallowing and feeling the swallow scrape. I opened the door. Warmth rushed at me. The smell of dinner, garlic and butter, wrapped around my head like a familiar scarf. It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a disguise. Like someone had put on my life as if it fit them. I stepped inside, and the first thing I saw was my own shoes lined neatly on the mat, my husband's boots beside them, and, right there, heels that weren't mine. High, pale heels. The kind of shoes you wear when you want your legs to look longer and your intentions to look innocent. I shut the door carefully behind me. The click sounded too loud. In the kitchen, someone moved. A drawer slid closed. The faint clink of a spoon against a mug. I walked forward, slow, like I was walking into a room where I'd been told there was a wild animal. My coat still on. My bag still on my shoulder. My pulse steady in a way that didn't feel like calm, more like numbness. The kitchen light was bright. Too bright. It made everything clean and sharp. She was there. Barefoot on my tiles, standing at my counter as if she'd been born there. My robe was hanging off her shoulders, my soft grey robe, the one I bought after my mother died because I wanted something that felt like a hug in the mornings. The sleeves were too long for her and she pushed them up. She had my mug in her hands, the one with the chipped handle. She turned her head when she heard me, and her expression didn't flicker into guilt the way a decent person's would. She smiled. Not sweetly. Confidently. As if she'd been waiting for this moment and had practiced it. I stood in the doorway to the kitchen, letting my eyes take in the whole scene with clinical precision. The pan on the stove. 2 plates on the counter. A wine bottle open. The way she held my mug like it belonged to her hand. I spoke, and my voice came out level, almost conversational, which terrified me more than if I'd screamed. I didn't realize we were having company. My words hung in the air. She blinked slowly. She set the mug down like she had all the time in the world. Behind her, there was movement, a shadow shifting, a soft footstep. My husband appeared in the hallway, buttoning his shirt. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. His cheeks were a little flushed, not from heat, but from something else. Something alive. He froze when he saw me. His face tightened with a flicker of panic that he tried to swallow quickly, like a man trying to pretend a cough didn't happen. I heard myself again, still calm, as if I were narrating a documentary about someone else's life. You left the deadbolt open. My husband's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted to her, then back to me. It wasn't the look of a man caught off guard by an accusation. It was the look of a man waiting to see which version of the truth he should use. I stepped farther into the kitchen. My coat brushed the counter. I could feel the heat from the stove against my thighs. It was all so normal, so domestic, like a postcard of home, except my home had been rearranged while I was gone. She took a breath, and I watched her shoulders lift under my robe, watched her carefully place sadness onto her face like makeup. And then she spoke, except I didn't let her voice enter this story in words. I watched her lips move. I watched the performance. I watched the way she angled her chin, as if she deserved sympathy. I answered her anyway, as if I could already hear what she was trying to sell me. No, I said softly. Don't do that. Don't start with tears. Don't start with how hard it's been for you. I'm not in the mood for a story. My husband shifted his weight, as if he wanted to step forward and touch my shoulder, as if he wanted to claim familiarity. I moved my shoulder slightly, not away from him exactly, but enough to make it clear there was no place for his hand anymore. I looked at her again, and my voice stayed smooth, the way it gets when I'm trying not to shatter. You're wearing my robe. I waited. I watched. She lifted her brows, as if I were being petty. As if fabric mattered more than betrayal. I'm going to ask one question, I said. And you're going to understand that the way you answer it will decide what happens next. My husband's throat bobbed when he swallowed. I held his gaze. How long? He didn't answer me. Not with his mouth. His silence was an answer all by itself. A strange quiet came over me, like a snowfall. I turned my head to her. How long? She stepped toward me, still in my robe, still barefoot, like she belonged. Her eyes were bright. Her mouth curved with something that wasn't apology. And she said something that made my skin turn cold, not because of the words, but because of how she said them. Like she was doing me a favor. I smiled faintly, because my body didn't know what else to do with horror. I didn't want to find out like this, I said, echoing the shape of her confession as if I could control it by repeating it. But you're right. It's better I hear it from you. I turned my head slowly, taking in the plates, the wine, the 2 forks laid out like a ritual. Like they'd been practicing my absence. Then I looked at my husband again. Are you going to talk? Or are you going to let her do all the explaining? He finally moved his lips. I saw the excuse forming. The familiar shape of him trying to make himself the victim of his own choices. I cut him off. I don't want to hear it, I said. Not yet. My voice lowered. Because I can already feel it in my body. I can feel where you've been lying to me. I can feel it like a bruise. I set my bag down carefully on the floor, as if I were placing a fragile object somewhere safe. I'm going to take a walk around my own house, I said. And I'm going to notice everything. I'm going to notice what's been moved. What's been taken. What's been touched? I glanced at her robe, at the loose belt hanging. And while I do that, I said, you're going to stand right there and you're not going to follow me, because if you do, I don't know what I'll do. The quiet that followed felt like a held breath. The kitchen clock ticked. Oil popped gently in the pan, unattended. I turned and walked down the hallway. My footsteps sounded foreign on the wood, like someone else's shoes on my floor. I paused at the base of the stairs and looked up toward the bedroom. A memory flashed behind my eyes, her arriving weeks ago with mascara running, suitcase in hand, trembling voice, saying she had nowhere else to go. I believed her. I gripped the banister, my hand wrapping around the polished wood, and I felt a sensation that wasn't just anger. It was something darker. Something that tasted like iron. Because in that moment, I realized something sharp and sickening. She didn't just want my husband. She wanted my whole life. And she was already standing in my kitchen like she owned it. When people hear a best friend, they imagine someone who cheered at your wedding, held your hair back when you were sick, and knew the names of the ghosts in your head. That part was true. Her name was Mara. Even now, saying it makes my tongue feel heavy. Mara and I met in university, in a lecture hall that smelled like old carpet and coffee. I remember her because she wasn't trying to be liked. She sat with her legs crossed, pen tapping against her teeth, eyes half-lidded with boredom like she already knew how the world worked better than everyone else. I was different then, quieter, smaller in myself. The kind of girl who apologized when someone bumped into her. She chose me. It felt like a gift. She laughed at my jokes like they were cleverer than they were. She told me secrets, and I told her mine. We built the kind of intimacy that makes you think you're immune to betrayal because you've seen each other in the ugliest light and stayed anyway. When my mother died, Mara held my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. When I couldn't sleep, she sat on my bed and talked until dawn about anything and everything, her voice filling the dark so I didn't have to hear my grief breathing. So when she showed up at my door months ago, crying, suitcase at her feet, looking like she'd been broken open, my instinct wasn't suspicion. It was love. She stood on my porch with her shoulders hunched as if the wind itself was accusing her. I remember my hand on the doorframe, my stomach dropping. I remember saying, quietly, come inside. I remember the way she stepped in and breathed in my home like she was tasting it. She told me a story. I watched her mouth form the words. I watched the tears gather. I watched the tremble in her hands. I answered her the way I always did, by offering safety. You can stay here, I said. As long as you need. You're not alone. My husband, Evan, stood behind me with his hand on my back, supportive, gentle. Evan had always been the kind of man people liked immediately. He smiled with ease. He had that soft confidence that made you feel like everything would be okay if you stayed close to him. He leaned around me and looked at Mara with concern. I spoke before she could even ask. Our guest room is yours, I said. No questions. No pressure. Just rest. Even now, I can picture the exact moment her eyes flicked past my face and landed on Evan. It was a glance most people would miss. Quick. Smooth. But it had weight. Like a coin dropped into a pocket. In those first days, I tried to make her feel normal. I made tea. I cooked her meals. I left fresh towels folded on the bed. I offered her my robe, yes, that same robe, because she said she didn't feel comfortable in her own skin and wanted something soft. I remember laughing lightly, trying to brighten the air. Take whatever you need, I said. It's just fabric. It's not sacred. I didn't understand that she made things sacred by taking them. The house was my pride. Not because it was huge, it wasn't, but because it was mine in a way I'd never had anything be mine before. My mother left me a small inheritance, enough to cover a down payment. I remember sitting at the solicitor's office, pen in hand, signing documents with shaking fingers, my heart pounding with a kind of hope that hurt. This place became my anchor. I painted the walls myself. I chose every fixture. I planted the garden out front with my own hands. I learned the sound of every pipe, every creak. I knew the way the morning light fell on the kitchen tiles. And Evan moved in after we got married. We built routines, coffee in the mornings, music while cooking, his arms around my waist sometimes when I washed dishes. I thought of our life as something solid. When Mara came, I thought we were simply adding a temporary chapter. At first, she was gratitude in human form. She washed dishes without being asked. She offered to cook dinner. She hugged me tightly and whispered things that made me feel like a hero. I told myself she was healing. But then the little changes began. The house didn't sound the same anymore. Mara started waking up early, earlier than me, and I'd come downstairs to find her already sitting at the table with Evan, both of them holding mugs, their heads angled toward each other like they were sharing a secret. I'd pause in the doorway, my hair messy, my eyes still sleepy, and I'd force a smile. "Morning," I'd say, keeping my voice light. "You two are up early." Mara would look at me with that bright expression that always made people want to comfort her, and I'd feel a flicker of something sharp. Not jealousy, I told myself. Just displacement. Evan would kiss my cheek, casual. "Couldn't sleep," he'd say. And Mara's eyes would stay on him a beat too long. She started copying small things. My perfume. My tea order. My way of folding towels. I'd catch her humming the same song I hummed when I cleaned. Once, I opened my wardrobe and found my favorite black dress hanging slightly out of place, the hanger turned the wrong way. I stared at it, fingers hovering, and felt a cold line of suspicion. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even ask. I told myself it was a mistake. But my body noticed. My body kept a tally. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted, wanting only silence and hot water and my bed. I walked in and heard them in the living room. The lights were low. The television was off. They were talking. Not about ordinary things. Their voices were soft. Intimate. I stood in the hallway unseen for a moment, my hand on the wall, and I listened just long enough to hear the tone, warm, caring, private. And my stomach turned, slow and heavy. I stepped into the room and forced my voice to be normal. "Hey," I said. "What are you two doing up?" They both looked at me. Mara's cheeks flushed, her hand flying to her chest like she'd been startled. Evan smiled too quickly. "Just talking," he said. "Just talking." As if talking like that wasn't a kind of touch. As days went by, Mara began to treat the house like a shared space in a way that wasn't respectful. She said we when she meant you and Evan. She moved things. My spice rack. My kitchen tools. A framed photo of my mother on the hallway table. She shifted it because it was too cluttered, and I found it turned at an angle, like it had been nudged away. I remember standing there, staring at the photo, my fingertips brushing the frame, feeling a quiet fury rise up. But then Mara would appear behind me with that wounded expression, and my instincts would twist into guilt. I told myself, she's fragile. She's going through something. Don't be cruel. I tried to talk to Evan about it one night. We were in bed, the room dark, the sound of Mara moving softly in the guest room down the hall. I turned my face into his shoulder and spoke in a low voice. This is harder than I thought, I admitted. Having someone else here. I feel like I can't breathe in my own house. Evan sighed. Not cruelly, but with impatience. She needs us, he said. It's temporary. I felt his words settle like a lid on a pot that was already boiling. I know, I said, keeping my tone gentle. But I've noticed some things. The way she... Evan shifted, interrupting without meaning to. You're overthinking it. The words stung because they were familiar. Because they were the kind of words men use when they don't want to look at something inconvenient. I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, and I thought, maybe I am overthinking. But then I remembered the glance Mara gave him that first day. And the way my robe looked on her shoulders. And the way my home had begun to feel like it belonged to someone else. A week later, I had my first moment of true fear. I came home and found Mara in the kitchen with paperwork spread out on the table. Not her own paperwork, mine. Mail. Envelopes. A folder I kept in the drawer for house documents. The one I rarely opened because looking at it reminded me of responsibilities and the weight of ownership. She looked up at me, smiled too casual. I felt my throat tighten. I spoke carefully. What's that? She moved her hands quickly, gathering the papers as if she'd been caught with something embarrassing, not invasive. I forced my voice to stay calm, almost friendly, because I didn't want to be the villain in her story. I don't keep those out, I said. Those are personal. Her lips parted. She made an expression I recognized, confusion pretending to be innocence. I didn't press. I didn't fight. I walked upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for a long time, hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for a verdict. This is my best friend, I told myself. She wouldn't. But my body had already started to disagree. Later that night, when I came downstairs for water, I saw Evan and Mara in the living room again. Sitting close. Their knees angled toward each other. His hand on the back of the sofa behind her, not touching her, but close enough to claim. They looked up when they saw me, and there was a split second, just one, where they both had the same expression. Guilt. Not panic. Not surprise. Guilt. And then it vanished, replaced by smiles. I stood there with my glass of water and felt something cold settle under my ribs, quiet and heavy. I didn't say anything. I simply watched. And in the silence between us, I realized that whatever was happening in my home had already begun to live without my permission. The first time Evan snapped at me because of Mara, it was over something small. I had asked, casually, lightly, if Mara could start looking for a place of her own soon. Not because I wanted her gone, I told myself, but because I wanted my house back. Evan's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't slam anything. He simply looked at me with a kind of disappointment that felt like punishment. I remember my hands on the kitchen counter, fingers splayed on the cool surface, trying to keep myself steady. I spoke gently, trying not to trigger whatever defensiveness I could see rising in him. I'm not throwing her out, I said. I'm just asking for a timeline. This wasn't meant to be permanent. His eyes narrowed. She's going through a lot, he said. I know, I replied. So am I. And this is my home. The words "my home" should have been neutral, factual. Instead, his expression sharpened, like I'd insulted him. He exhaled hard through his nose and looked away. And Mara was standing in the doorway listening. She didn't step in. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched, and the smallest smile tugged at the corner of her mouth before she smoothed it away and replaced it with that wounded look. I felt my stomach drop. I turned to her and forced myself to speak with kindness because that's what decent people do. Mara, I said softly, I hope you didn't hear that and think I don't care about you. I do. I just. Her face crumpled theatrically. She moved her lips, and I could already see the script. The apologies, I didn't mean to be a burden, either I'll leave tonight. I held up my hand. No, I said, firm but quiet. Don't. I'm not doing emotional blackmail in my own kitchen. Evan stared at me like I'd slapped her. And right then, I saw it, the shift. The moment Evan began to see me as the obstacle. That night, I slept lightly, drifting in and out of uneasy dreams. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I woke to a sound, soft, like a floorboard complaining. I lay still, listening. Another creak. Another. Footsteps in the hallway. My heart began to beat hard and slow, each thud thick with dread. I slid out of bed quietly and padded to the door, opening it a crack. The hallway was dim. Shadows pooled along the walls. Mara's door was open. Evan's side of the bed was empty. For a moment, the world tilted, and I had to grip the doorframe to keep myself upright. My body felt cold, as if my blood had drained away. I closed the door silently and stood there in the dark, my mind trying to construct a lie big enough to cover what I already knew. Maybe he went to the bathroom. Maybe he heard her crying. Maybe. But no. Because I heard it then, a low murmur from the guest room, the sound of someone's voice soft and close. I couldn't make out words. I didn't need to. I walked back to bed and lay down. I stared at the ceiling. My hands were clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I didn't cry. Not yet. The next morning, Evan came back into our room with his hair slightly messy, his expression too casual. He slid into bed as if he belonged there, as if he hadn't just stepped out of a different life. I turned my head and looked at him, my voice still calm because calm was the only thing I had left that belonged to me. Where were you? I asked. He blinked, then shrugged. Mara had a panic attack, he said. I helped her calm down. I watched his face, searching for honesty the way you search a room for something you've lost. And I realized, slowly, sickly, that he wasn't even trying very hard to convince me. Because he didn't think he had to. I nodded once. Okay, I said, as if I accepted it. But inside, something turned over. You're lying, I thought. And you're getting comfortable doing it. Over the next week, the triangulation became constant. Mara needed Evan for everything. She needed a ride to the shops. She needed help carrying groceries. She needed someone to sit with her when she felt unsafe. And Evan volunteered. He began coming home later. Began checking his phone more. Began smiling at messages he'd tilt away from me. When I asked what was funny, he'd say, just a meme, and his tone would carry irritation, like my curiosity was exhausting. One afternoon, I came home and found 2 coffee mugs in the sink. 2. One with Evan's usual grounds stuck to the bottom, and the other, mine, with lipstick smudged on the rim. Except I hadn't worn lipstick that day. I stared at the mug for a long time, feeling a strange heat build in my chest. I picked it up slowly, held it under the light. The shade wasn't mine. The smudge wasn't my shape. My fingers tightened around ceramic until my knuckles whitened. I heard Mara behind me, barefoot, soft footfalls. I didn't turn. I spoke into the silence, my voice careful. "Did you use my mug?" She answered with her lips, with that breezy dismissiveness, with that casual entitlement. I watched her in my peripheral vision and felt my stomach twist. I set the mug down gently, like it was evidence. "You can have any mug you want," I said quietly. "But don't erase me in my own kitchen." The smear campaign started after that. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was little comments made to mutual friends when I wasn't there, comments that would float back to me days later like smoke. Mara would sigh and tilt her head sympathetically, and people would say things to me like, "You've been stressed lately. Are you okay? You seem tense. You should be kinder to Mara. She's been through a lot." I'd smile and nod and feel something dark coil in my stomach. Because I could see what she was doing. She was rewriting me. Turning me into the villain so she could wear my life without guilt. Evan began defending her automatically. If I said Mara was messy, Evan would say, she's grieving. If I said Mara overstepped, Evan would say, she's trying. If I said I felt uncomfortable, Evan would say, you're being paranoid. The word paranoid landed like a slap. One night, I found my scarf missing. A soft black scarf I'd worn for years, something that smelled like my perfume and winter air. The next day, Mara walked into the living room wearing it. She twirled once, playful, as if she were a child trying on clothes. I watched her spin, the scarf moving around her throat like a collar. My hands went cold. I spoke softly, my voice almost gentle. "That's mine." She paused mid-twirl and looked at me with wide eyes, like she'd forgotten I existed. "Oh," she said with her mouth. She shrugged. She didn't remove it. Evan looked up from his phone and smiled at her. "It looks good on you," he said. My chest tightened so abruptly it hurt. I turned to Evan and kept my voice calm because calm made my words sharper. "Why are you complimenting her in my things?" I asked. Evan's expression changed. Irritation flickered. "It's just a scarf," he said. I nodded slowly. "It's just a scarf," I repeated. "And it's just a mug. And it's just my robe. And it's just my kitchen. And it's just my husband." My voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. But the silence that followed felt thick, like syrup. Mara's eyes flicked to Evan, and I saw it again, the private language between them. That night, there was a gathering, a small dinner with friends. People I'd known for years. People who'd sat at my table and eaten my food and laughed in my home. I set plates out. I cooked. I poured wine. I smiled. Mara floated through the room like she'd always belonged there, touching shoulders, laughing softly, standing a little too close to Evan. At one point, she sat on the arm of the sofa beside him, her thigh pressing into his side. She leaned down and whispered something into his ear. He laughed, too loud, too intimate. I watched them from across the room, my fingers gripping a wine glass. My stomach was tight, my skin hot, and yet my face remained composed. I was watching something ugly unfold in slow motion, and everyone around me was too distracted by conversation to see the blade sliding in. Mara lifted her hand and touched Evan's cheek, a soft gesture, almost affectionate. And he didn't pull away. He didn't even flinch. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet fracture. I walked over to them slowly, my heels clicking lightly on the floor. I stopped in front of Mara and looked down at her hands still on my husband's face. I smiled faintly. "Could you not do that?" I said. The room quieted a little. Not fully, people still spoke, but a hush slid between nearby conversations, curiosity rising. Mara blinked up at me, her hand lowering slowly, and she made a face like I'd embarrassed her. I spoke again, still calm. "I know you're going through a hard time," I said. "But you don't get to use my husband as your emotional support animal." A few people laughed awkwardly, unsure if I was joking. Evan's face darkened. He leaned toward me and murmured something under his breath, anger disguised as restraint. My cheeks burned, not with shame, but with a strange kind of clarity. He's protecting her, I realized. In public. In my house. Later that night, after everyone left, I went upstairs and found the guest room bed untouched again. The sheets were perfectly smooth. The pillow uncreased. I stood there staring, my heart pounding. I turned and walked down the hallway to my bedroom, my feet silent on the wood. Evan was in the bathroom. The shower ran. I stared at the closed door and felt a cold wave pass over me. Then I noticed something else. The drawer in the hallway console, the one where I kept house documents, was slightly open. My breath caught. I walked to it and pulled it open. The folder was there, but it was shifted, messy, like someone had dug through it. My fingers trembled slightly as I flipped through papers. Mortgage statements. Insurance. Renovation receipts. And then, I froze. A document with my name on it. My signature at the bottom. Except, I didn't remember signing it. My signature looked like mine, but wrong, too firm, too practiced, like someone had traced it. The paper shook slightly in my hands. I felt my mouth go dry. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. Don't panic. Don't accuse without proof. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you unravel. I put the document back exactly as I found it. I closed the drawer. I walked into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly together. When Evan came in, hair damp, smelling like soap, he smiled at me like nothing was wrong. I looked up at him with calm eyes and spoke softly. "We need to talk about the paperwork." His smile faltered. "What paperwork?" he asked. I held his gaze. "The house paperwork," I said. "I saw documents with my signature on them that I don't remember signing." Evan's jaw tightened. A flash of something crossed his face. Fear, irritation, both. He exhaled and rubbed his forehead as if I were exhausting him. "I handled some admin stuff," he said. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," I replied. "It's my house." There it was again, his reaction to those words. His posture stiffened. He looked at me like I'd reminded him of something he resented. "I live here too," he said. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "You live here. But I own this place. And I need to know exactly what you've been doing." He opened his mouth, then shut it, as if he was choosing the least damaging lie. "I refinanced something," he said. "To help with bills. It's fine." My stomach dropped, slow and sick. You refinanced without me? I asked quietly. He shrugged with false nonchalance. You were busy. I didn't want to stress you. A laugh almost escaped me, sharp and humorless. You didn't want to stress me, I repeated. So you signed my name. Evan's eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic. The word dramatic tasted bitter. I stared at him, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Not peace. Not acceptance. Strategy. Because in that moment, I understood, if I fought emotionally, I would lose. They would paint me unstable. They would twist it. So I kept my voice soft. Okay, I said. Show me the documents. Evan hesitated. And in that hesitation, I felt the floor shift again. The next day, Mara appeared in the kitchen with her hands pressed to her stomach. Her face was pale. Her eyes too wide. She looked like a woman in a hospital drama, fragile and important. Evan was beside her, one hand hovering near her waist as if he had permission to touch. My blood ran cold. I leaned against the counter, my arms folded loosely, and watched them with calm eyes. Mara's lips moved. Her eyes flicked between me and Evan. She made a show of swallowing, of steadying herself. Evan looked at me, his expression tight, as if bracing for impact. My voice came out low and even. What's going on? I asked. Mara's mouth formed words I knew before I heard them. The kind of words meant to freeze a room. I felt the air thicken. I nodded once, very slowly, as if I was absorbing information calmly. But inside, something dark rose up, slow as a tide. I spoke softly. So, I said. You're telling me you're pregnant. Evan flinched. Mara's eyes shone with tears, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. I stared at her stomach, flat beneath my robe again, and felt a quiet nausea. Because I knew Mara. And I knew performance. And I knew when a story was being weaponized. I tilted my head slightly. Congratulations, I said, my voice still calm. When's the due date? Mara hesitated just a fraction too long. Just a heartbeat. Evan's eyes flicked to her. And in that tiny pause, I saw the seam in their lie. I let silence stretch. I watched her scramble internally, watched her face tighten imperceptibly as she reached for an answer. I smiled faintly. You don't know, I said softly. Interesting. Evan stepped forward, defensive. His body angled between me and her like a shield. She just found out, he said. She's overwhelmed. I looked at him. Are you the father? I asked quietly. The question landed like a stone thrown into still water. Evan's face went pale. He didn't answer fast enough. And that was all I needed. I nodded slowly, as if confirming something to myself. I see, I whispered. Mara's lips moved again, more tears, more softness. I watched her carefully. Then I spoke, my voice like velvet over steel. If you're pregnant, I said, we're going to do this properly. Evan blinked. What do you mean? I mean, I continued, you don't get to announce something like that in my kitchen and expect me to just accept it. I reached for my phone on the counter, my movements unhurried. We're going to book a doctor's appointment, I said. We're going to confirm it. We're going to get dates. We're going to get evidence. Mara's eyes widened. Evan's jaw clenched. I smiled slightly, still calm, still controlled. And if you're lying, I added, you're going to regret choosing me as the woman to test. Silence. The kind that hums with danger. Mara's breathing sped up. Evan shifted his weight. They both looked like people who'd expected screaming and got something worse, a quiet woman who was thinking. I set my phone down and folded my arms again. Now, I said softly, I'm going upstairs. And when I come back down, I want the truth. Not a performance. I turned away, my heart beating hard in my chest, and I walked up the stairs slowly, feeling every step under my feet. At the landing, I paused. I looked down into the hallway where they stood close together. And I felt something settle into place inside me, something that wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was resolve. Because the mug, the scarf, the robe, the laughter, those were just the visible parts. The real betrayal was deeper. It was paperwork. It was timing. It was the way they were trying to build a story where I didn't belong in my own life. And as I walked toward my bedroom, I already knew what I was going to do next. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Methodically. Quietly. And with enough patience to make their downfall feel like it was their own idea.